Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Spillane. I am today's guest interviewer for Donate for Refugees. I help run a group called LE Solidarity, which is a group based in Leicester, and we have been collecting, sorting and distributing aid to refugees in France and elsewhere for about 5 years now. I'm here today to interview Clark Schofield, who's the Director of Collective Aid based in Serbia. Collective Aid also work in France as well. So I don't know a great deal about the refugee crisis over in the Balkans. So I'm hopefully going to learn quite a lot today from Clark. So Clark, if I just hand over to you. Thank you ever so much for joining us and letting me chat to you. So if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all.
Yeah, as mentioned, my name's Clark, and I've been working with Collective Aid for about 3.5 years now, moving from the United States, where I worked in addiction and homelessness, in the addiction and homelessness field. This is my first experience doing work with refugees. And I've learned so much, and I'm excited to share a bit about the Balkans, the situation here, especially since it doesn't often reach the news.
Well, yeah, I'd certainly say that because obviously in the British media we see a lot about, well, we see more recently about obviously France. But I know that the Balkan route is one of the ways that people are traveling through, or were traveling through into Europe. So just tell me, how many camps are there over in that area? What and how are they sort of spread?
Yeah, so a little rundown right now. In Serbia at the moment, there are approximately 7,000 people in the country, with probably 5,500 of those, 5,500 to 6,000 living in government-run camps. There are approximately 17 camps. They open and close them depending on the population of people that need to access them. These are camps that were built and populated by refugees of the Yugoslav wars in the 90s. And many of them were still had refugees living there from those wars when people started arriving in 2015. So the camp system in Serbia is quite developed. There were a lot of them. They were able to get them running quite quickly. Of course, the environment of those camps and the quality of the camps can vary wildly. So there is quite a bit of capacity in Serbia. From what I've heard about camps across Europe, it's actually one of the better places as far as camps go. Now in Bosnia, where we also work, there were not any camps in place already. And so when people started moving into Bosnia, when the Balkan route shifted into Bosnia in 2018, the system was totally overwhelmed and still is. There's not nearly enough capacity. The camps are really horrendous and overcrowded.
So these government camps then, so that in itself is different to in northern France, isn't it, where we see people sort of sleeping anywhere they can on the roads amongst trees, in these makeshift camps, and there's these constant evictions and stuff every week, really, moving people on, the constant sort of harassment. Is that not the same sort of situation then in Bosnia? Is it more, I guess, settled is the word? Not that it's the right word, but is it more stable?
I don't know if I would say it's more stable. There is less of a concerted effort by the government to evict people from the unofficial squats where people are staying. So out of the people who are in the country, 7,000 in Serbia, about 9,000 in Bosnia. In Serbia, there are 1,000 plus who are sleeping outside of the official camp systems. And in Bosnia, that number is much higher, probably around 4,000, especially with the closure of a recent camp. So there are a lot of people sleeping rough. The police do not evict them in the same way that they do in Calais, though it does still happen, and it depends on the region as well. So there are areas where there's a lot of police presence and people are getting moved. Recently, there was an example in the north of Serbia where we work of police showing up with buses, loading everyone who is in the unofficial camp, and just driving them all the way to the south of the country, probably 5-6 hours from where they were, knowing that people who are on the northern border of Serbia with Hungary are actively trying to cross the border. And so it's a move just to discourage people from doing that. What we've seen in France and also in the Balkans is that when people have made the journey they have to get to this point, this police pressure is not doing anything to actually deter people. It's really just torture. It's state-sanctioned torture.
Yeah, I get that. They've already gone through so much that another roadblock isn't going to stop them. It's just like you say, it's just making their life that bit harder, isn't it? It's kind of,
and their journey more unsafe, as we've seen on every one of these borders, these fortified borders. People die all the time, and it's a direct result of the position that governments have taken, one of deterrence rather than welcome.
Yeah. So obviously, again, I'm only drawing on like sort of my knowledge and experience from Northern France. So there are a few different groups who work with people. Are there a few different charities that go out to the camps and help people? Do they have food distribution, or is it clothing? What sort of support do you offer over there?
Yeah, there are still grassroots organizations working in the Balkans, though the number of them is far smaller than even the number of grassroots orgs working in Calais. So in Serbia, there are a few local organizations, many of which focus on some more long-term support. So there are legal aid organizations. There's an organization in Belgrade that's kind of an info point for new arrivals. One of our partner organizations works in the north of Serbia, but in a different, on the Croatian border instead of the Hungarian. There is still a movement of people supporting here. It can be quite difficult too because of the working environment, and honestly just because there's not much attention paid here by the media. So it's not drawing people who want to support here. In Bosnia, there are quite a few more organizations working on the ground, and a ton of local volunteers who do essential work, and really bring, I think, the local perspective and are able to communicate to people in the country the reality that people on the ground are facing. And a harsh reality is that local volunteers often receive much more negative pressure, negative attention and pressure from the government than international volunteers do.
Is that right? I was going to, my next question was going to be about locals. So what is the sort of the atmosphere with the locals? Obviously, is it very negative? So in Bosnia, there are local people that do help support, but so what's the situation? Do you often come up against a lot of resistance, or?
The majority of people in Serbia and in Bosnia are at the very least tolerant. Unfortunately, as in many places, you have a very vocal very extreme right wing, which has targeted people on the move and the people who support them. Just a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I believe, there was an anti-migrant protest planned in one of the parks where people actually sleep when they arrive to Belgrade. A few hundred people showed up. Thankfully, there was a counter protest organized where as many people showed up and said, "This isn't okay. We don't accept this hatred and this rhetoric." Unfortunately, there have been cases of violence. There are some pretty extreme right-wing groups who have organized these people's patrols, they call them, where they'll just walk through the streets of Belgrade and harass people that they perceive as being a migrant. There are more extreme cases. People have been physically assaulted. We've been quite lucky in that our team hasn't encountered any of that violence directed at us, though we have been pretty regularly harassed by the police in some of our locations, which is true in Calais as well.
So do you have many volunteers actually out there on the ground, or is it quite a small group of people that you have?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of different things in Serbia and in Bosnia, and they've required different numbers of volunteers. At the moment, we have 2 projects in Serbia, one in Belgrade, where we're operating a shower and laundry center for anyone who's sleeping rough to access. And then in the north of Serbia, we're doing an emergency outreach project. Between the two, we have about 18 volunteers in Serbia. And then in Bosnia, we're working in Sarajevo, providing basically basic NFI, blankets, sleeping bags, tents, that sort of thing. And there we have 6 volunteers at the moment. So across the Balkans, just over 20.
Wow, that's actually not that many people, is it? When you consider the area that, the area that you're spread over, that's significantly less than I'd have thought, and certainly would hope for. So I guess currently, obviously, everything's changed with COVID. How has that affected you in the way that your organisation works? Are you still really able to get on the ground and operate as normal, or?
Serbia had a very strict initial lockdown, actually, where we weren't able to leave our homes from 5 p.m. until I think 6 a.m. For the first 2 months. So for 2 months in Serbia, we were almost fully shut down. There was no way to do anything. The government also totally locked down the camps. They went around all of the informal settlements and moved people into the camps and then just shut them down totally. So as we focus on people who are living outside of the official camps, there weren't even really people out that to support, though there are people who kind of avoided the police roundup. So after 2 months, the restrictions were eased and we were able to get back to work in the north of Serbia and to start developing the project that we're doing in Belgrade. In Sarajevo, there were restrictions as well. Our team had already become quite small and we were focused on handing over a free shop that we had set up in one of the large camps near Sarajevo. And so when COVID came, we actually spent that time focusing on finalizing our registration in Bosnia. So we're now legally registered in Serbia and Bosnia, which has really increased the amount of work that we can do there.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm talking for myself, but I know a lot of people, we do this, the type of people we are, to volunteer with these groups and do what we do. We're sort of compassionate, empathetic people, and I find very often I get quite attached to the people. I feel it quite personally to the people that I help and stuff. Have you come across anybody, any families, anybody who's particularly stuck with you or their story, anything that's really resonated with you in the time that you've been out there?
There's so many stories over the years. I think that anyone who's done this work for a period of time, even a very short period of time, walks away totally changed with a very different perspective on the world. And
Yeah.
I mean, there are stories of people who over and over have just sacrificed so much for their families and for a safe future. The one story that's coming to mind now is a man that we recently helped who had crossed the Hungarian border, but in the process of crossing broke his leg. And he was stranded in a field with a broken leg and with some quite severe health issues for 5 days in Hungary. He called the police and no one would help him. He called the police knowing that he would be arrested and deported. He called the ambulance, no one came. He called border police, no one came. And eventually, days after, as many as 5 days after he broke his leg, without food and very little water, he got in contact with us. He found our contact, and we were able to find someone in Hungary to advocate for him, which was great. The police did show up. They took him to the hospital. They put a cast on his leg and illegally pushed him back over the border. These illegal pushbacks are happening throughout Europe, and it's really a strategy by the EU, not an official one, but the fact that they haven't done anything about it is telling. So he was pushed back from Hungary, which is an EU country, into Serbia without ever having the chance to register his asylum claim. So he's pushed back into Serbia. He goes back to the place he was living before, and he waits to recover until he can do it again. He actually wrote a beautiful poem that's posted on the Collective Aid Instagram account, and I would recommend that everyone who sees this go and check that out. It's just a few posts ago, I believe. But this beautiful poem of just longing for safety and wanting to maintain hope, but how difficult it is after years of trying and experiencing the same hardships over and over and over.
That's just yeah, I can imagine how that would impact you, having sort of seen that. Obviously, given slight change, obviously it's back over to France recently. Obviously last week we had the family that drowned in the Channel trying to cross, and obviously Collective Aid do work in France as well. Is there anything happening within the organisation, obviously with what happened and the fact that people are going to carry on trying on the boats? So what's your perspective on that? What are you advising? What are you sort of doing to help people?
Yeah. Well, it can feel so hopeless for people on the ground, because these decisions are being made by people who are so detached from, well, the generous reading is that they're so detached from the situation that they're making these horrific policies. The less generous reading is that they're so cruel that they do know the situation and are still choosing to do things that are killing people. We try to use the limited voice that we have to inform people about what's happening, because obviously that's the first step to something changing, is just people knowing what's going on. We've joined, protests and petitions, but it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take a response that's multifaceted and includes people from all walks of life and different careers coming together to truly impact change. This is not a new issue. It is one that will continue to develop and get worse. With climate change, it's expected that there could be 2 billion new refugees by in 50 years, or by 2050. That's an astounding number. It's a number that when you think about how poorly the system has handled the comparatively few numbers of refugees that there are now, you see where we could be going. And so it really has to be everyone, at least a vocal majority of people who say that we can and we will do better, and will insist that the people representing us in our governments do better. And there are a lot of ways that we can do that. None of them easy, and none of them fast, unfortunately.
I think for me, I kind of feel that people aren't going to, now that they've started to cross in the boats, and people have been successful, it is kind of going the same way that it did in the Med, when obviously it started as a trickle and people tried the first few trips and stuff. I feel like, unfortunately and tragically, more people are going to die on our government's doorstep, and whether or not that, I feel like maybe with what's happening in the Mediterranean, with the boats sinking and capsizing, people dying in the Mediterranean, it's somebody else's problem. And that when it comes to our doorstep and people are dying in the Channel, and I hate to say this, but like maybe our government might step up or sit up and pay more attention to it. But then I also feel that the only policies they'll put in place are worse than what we've already got. They're not compassionate in any way. And so you just kind of want to tell people not to make the journey. It's not worth it. Obviously, don't do it. But you know that people will. And I feel like it's quite a frustrating situation for us as volunteers to be in, because I wish they didn't have to get on a boat and try and cross, but they aren't left with any other options, are they? So it's just one of these situations where you do feel kind of hopeless, and our voices, we can shout from the rooftops, and we will continue to do so, but we have such a limited impact. And so do you ever feel kind of just not despondent, but like you're fighting a losing battle, I
lost you for the last part of that question.
Do you ever feel like
said, do you ever feel
do you ever feel like you're fighting a losing battle, or you want to help these people, desperately, passionately want to help these people, and beg them also not to make the journey, but also want them to be able to claim their asylum, and it's a catch-22, isn't it? I find myself conflicted often. Do you feel the same way?
It's difficult to maintain hope, especially hope that anything could change anytime soon. What keeps me motivated is knowing that it always seems hopeless until it isn't. And throughout history, there have been these times where things get so bad, and there's just an outcry against whatever the situation is, and I feel something happening under the surface. I feel this collective kind of rage at the situation now, and the system that's led to it. These movements always include people taking to the streets and being very, very loud. And I think that that's going to be a big part of what happens next. You know, there are a lot of groups, and many groups have different approaches to this work, different values in some areas. But at the end of the day, we're all fighting for the same thing. And I think that there are enough people in the world who, with the knowledge and with a way to act, will. Now we still have governments to fight, because every time the situation gets worse, their response seems to be to add fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
You know, and it's maddening, but you have to maintain at least enough hope to keep you going. And I think for many of us, that's balanced with quite a bit of anger, you know, and anger against a world and a system that's just failed so badly. Just if history is honest, it will not look kindly on this part of our history. Yeah.
No, it won't. I guess people that are watching this might be wanting to know how they could get involved, how they can support collective aid. How can people do that?
Yeah. Well, we are a volunteer-led organization. Everything that we've done, every project, every new idea has come from volunteers. And so if you have the time and the ability to volunteer with us, it's a great way to be involved, to learn a bit more about the situation, and to build a personal connection with what's happening. Obviously, now is a difficult time to travel, and so volunteering isn't really an option for many, not to mention the expense. Really, if I could ask people watching to do one thing, it would be to educate yourself and to use whatever voice you have. Social media is, I think, can trick us into believing that we're doing something, but people skim over things all the time, especially if they don't agree with it. So personal conversations with people you know, your family and your friends, anyone who will talk to you. Of course, there's always a need for financial support and material support. We're grateful for all of the organizations, including yours and Donate for Refugees, who've supported our work in one way or another. And it's the only way we can do it. So if you have items to donate, if you have money to donate, you can reach out to us, and we can help you decide where you want to send it and what project you want it to go to. We're so grateful. So many people have supported us incredibly generously through this time, and for the last years. We don't take, we're an independent organization like so many others. Most of our money comes from small donations and groups that have been fundraising for grassroots organizations.
I think we're perhaps going to run out of time shortly. I could sit and talk to you all day, but I think that we might get cut off soon. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and for everything that you do. And I really hope that you can continue the work you do. Also, I'd like you not to have to continue the work you do in the same way. Exactly. But yeah, so that's all we've got time for today. Please join Donate for Refugees for their next regular Facebook Live. on the 15th of November at 2 p.m, which will have Caroline Kerr talking to Rachel Pettis of Mazzy Together in Cyprus. Clark, thank you again. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Oh, thanks so much, Rebecca. It's been my pleasure.
And that's all.